Imagine it's the year 1920. You want to learn physics from the best mind on earth, Albert Einstein. To do that, you'd need a train ticket to Berlin and you had to sit in a lecture hall at a specific hour. If you weren't in that room, that knowledge was effectively locked away in an ivory tower. And there were many reasons why you couldn't have been in that room. Women, for example, were only allowed to study since about 20 years earlier. Men couldn't be there as they had to waste their lives for a stupid war started by the German Kaiser until 2 years earlier. Students with the wrong cultural background, sexual orientation, or political views were banned from studying there, and way worse, only about 10 years later. Fast forward to 2012. You could pull out a device of your pocket while sitting on a bus in Chicago, or a cafe in Paris, and have a Nobel Prize winner explain quantum physics to you for the cost of a data plan. Many world-famous universities offered parts of their wisdom for free, open to anybody who wanted to listen. So-called MOOCs, massive open online courses, made it to the title page of the New York Times. Disruption of the educational system, the end of universities, democratization of education, bridging the digital gap, were claims made by the mostly American protagonists of the movement, Coursera, Udacity, or edX. The Europeans in the picture, as so often, were a bit more modest in their claims. But many people responsible in the European universities didn't want to miss the bus either. To be exact, when the Americans claimed to have invented this thing, 3 Canadians, Stephen Downes, George Siemens, and David Cormier, actually have invented it 4 years earlier. Full disclosure, I've been involved in the whole history on the European side, to be exact with the first European MOOC platform, OpenHBI, and many of its partner platforms, OpenSAP, OpenWHO, or the AI Campus, to mention just a few. In total, all these platforms had about 15 million course enrollments when I left there at the end of 2023. Remarkable, but still a very small number compared to the big fish in the tank. Now, just 14 years later, in 2026, the buzz has pretty much petered out. Universities still exist. The so-called disruption of education was rather a bit of an itch. The digital gap has actually widened. Has education really been democratized? So, what happened? We'll get back to that in a second. MOOCs have not been the first occurrence of distance teaching or educational technologies. Actually, even back in the 1920s and earlier, distance teaching was widespread. So-called correspondence courses were the norm at the time, amongst others developed by Langenscheidt and Tusser to teach foreign languages. And they still are in place. Fernuniversität Hagen, for example, is still in the process to fully digitalize their offers. In the US, such postal courses were incredibly popular back then. Probably not the least to the vast distances to the universities when you lived in a more rural area. In the 1960s, the visionary Buckminster Fuller dreamt of gigantic lecture halls where students gathered from all over the place under so-called geodesic domes, an invention of Fuller, to listen to the world's best and leading scientists. He actually envisioned something he called two-way television, basically a sort of internet social media thingy to make this more interactive. He also had the idea to record those lectures. This plan actually derived from a certain dislike of many professors towards teaching. Actually, Einstein also was promised a position in Berlin with a minimum to no teaching obligations to win him for the University of Berlin. So in my initial example, you actually might have had bad luck, and despite your long train ride and having found a seat in the lecture hall, he possibly wouldn't even have been there. Apart from that, it's a certain misconception that the world's greatest researchers are also the best teachers. We'll have to skip a couple of steps and fast forward through the dark ages of early teaching machines as the ones invented by B.F. Skinner and fellow behaviorists. We'll also quickly skip through educational radio, educational movies, and educational television, which had their zenith between the 1930s and 1980s. Also MIT's OpenCourseWare and iTunes U, which have been some of the direct MOOC predecessors around 2000. In 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic forced its mark upon the educational landscape. Schools were closed. All educational offers, from sports and dancing to music and mathematics, from kindergarten to elementary school to universities and executive education. Everything had to go online from one day to another. I experienced this firsthand with OpenHBI, OpenSAP, but particularly OpenWHO. The graph shows the sudden increase of enrollments from 30,000 learners to 4 million within a few months at the beginning of the pandemic. After the end of the pandemic, many academics and responsible persons in schools, however, backlashed and immediately turned off all the digital support that they had set up hastily and often in a rather half-hearted or sloppy way. Happily ever after, they could return to an everything back to normal state. Let's say that this move was maybe a bit too optimistic and short-sighted given the current state of the world. Remember what I said about the 1920s? Are there really so many differences? Right after the pandemic, when ChatGPT was released in November 2022, the discussion about education hit another level. And it has taken a couple of turns by now, from initial appraisal, democratization of education, bridging the digital gap, to statements that cause different feelings in different stakeholders. Disruption of the educational system, the end of universities, to sheer panic. This is the end of education itself. Using AI makes us stupid. Oh snap, what can we actually assess and how? Others rather ask, and why? In my opinion, the discussion about assessment is the most interesting one, as many assessment approaches always were flawed, and the new generative AI tools pull this fact in plain sight for everybody. You might have noticed that I just copied the headlines from 2012 to 2022, and you might be able to find similar ones back in 1922. You remember the heyday of postal courses. Another big topic is the individualization of learning. Everybody at their own pace, everybody addressed individually. Let me quote an article from the MIT Technology Review. It is better than traditional on-campus instruction because assignments and assessments could be tailored specifically to each student. Prospective enrollees at the University of Chicago were told that they would receive individual personal attention delivered according to any personal schedule. And that actually does not refer to the AI craze or MOOCs. It refers to the postal courses of the 1920s. So, same headlines all over again and again and again. My own view on personalization is rather critical. Following John Hattie, who said recently, the biggest problem with individualized and personalized learning lies in the overemphasis of working alone. Learning is a social endeavor, and we do that best in groups or teams. We always did. By the way, if you have a look at that picture, mansplaining also seems to have been an issue back then, or maybe it's just the bias in the AI that created this image. So-called AI-driven Socratic tutors that don't just give answers but ask the right questions to trigger a light bulb moment might be helpful in this direction, as they always are available. But as with human teammates, there's always a danger that they do all the work for us. And as there's always a lack of time, we're often too willing to accept that. Even though, as we might have produced a great result, the learning tends to be zero. At this point, let's get back to the MOOCs. We've seen a recurring pattern of big claims that often didn't become true. The Gartner hype cycle calls this the trough of disillusionment. The question is, did they fail, as many say, and if yes, why? One of the major criticisms always have been the low completion rates of the MOOCs. From my point of view, this discussion has always been flawed and always compared apples and oranges. From our experience, we can clearly say that most of the learners that didn't complete the course didn't even start it. This is a built-in issue, you might also call it a feature, of most platforms. People register for a course that might start half a year later. At that point, they forgot about it, or they have other priorities. The platforms rather boasted with large registration numbers and rather accepted the lower completion rates caused by this than adding, for example, a bookmark feature for courses that would have easily solved this issue. Most of those who actually did drop out did so during the first week, realizing that the course didn't fit their needs, was on the wrong level, or just wasn't what they expected. Particularly the last point often was a marketing issue, as marketing departments by nature, tend to be more interested in large enrollment numbers than in high completion rates. Most participants who announced their dropout or answered the course surveys listed a lack of time caused by changed professional or private circumstances to be the reason. The whole completion rate discussion was mostly triggered by learning analytics researchers trying to predict dropouts based on their interaction with the platforms and courses and intervening in some form to keep them going. While the field of learning analytics is very important in general, this particular approach in this context was rather pointless, given the actual dropout reasons. Those actively involved in creating and delivering MOOCs mostly saw the class rather half full than half empty anyway, as even with the low completion ratio, the actual number of learners who did complete the courses was way higher than what any regular on-site university class could have handled in years, while the basic claim that everybody can participate in MOOCs and learn has been true. It hasn't always been realized that not everybody who is able to enroll has the required fundament of knowledge and skills to actually pass the courses. The more advanced and the more complicated the courses have been, the lower were the enrollment numbers and the completion rates. Pretty obvious, actually. On the other hand, not everybody is interested in producing beginners' courses, particularly not in sophisticated high-level academic environments. It remains to be observed what the development of the AI will do in that field. Is it just the next hype, or will it remain? Right now, as all previous technologies, it's hyped by some and demonized by others. My prediction is that, as all previous technologies, it will settle in and be assimilated to the educational system, improving things for those who actually want to learn, and maybe making it a bit easier for those who just want to pass. Distance education has been around in several forms since ages. With the help of digital technologies, the improving quality of fast internet connections, the experience gained in MOOCs and its predecessors, and particularly the comparatively new means of synchronous and asynchronous communication technology, it became possible to move forward and offer full-blown university degrees, fully based on online courses, such as Georgia Tech's Computer Science Online Master or the German University of Digital Science.